everybody. Glad you could make it tonight. It's 6 o'clock and we'll get started. Welcome to the July meeting of the nonprofit Plant-Based Nutrition Organization of Wisconsin, or what we call ourselves PB Now. I'm your host, Terry Lynch. The mission of our nonprofit group is to educate, inspire, and support each other on an evidence-backed whole food plant-based nutritional path for health and improved quality of life. Our group is open to everyone, those plant-based and those just curious about it. It's meant to be a non-judgmental place for people to come get information, inspiration, and support. If you'd like more information about our group, our upcoming meeting dates, speakers, or resources, you can check out our videos of our past meetings. Just Google us at pbnow.org. As we do each time, can I see a show of hands, either by raising your hand or using the thumbs up icon at the bottom of the Zoom screen to show how many of you are currently following a plant-based lifestyle? I see the thumbs coming up and the hands up. It's probably about 30, 40%. So, as we mentioned at the beginning of each meeting, the evidence of the benefits of plant-based nutrition in improving health and quality of life for people of all ages, as published in non-biased medical research, is quite striking. Whether it's improving health through increased energy, weight loss, preventing, slowing, stopping, or reversing problems like allergies, digestive problems, diabetes, heart disease, and early dementia, or increasing our quality of life by helping us feel better, it's strengthening our immune system, increasing our endurance, improving athletic performance, speeding recovery from exercise, reducing joint pain, clearing thinking, or reducing the physical, emotional, and financial side effects of the illnesses, drugs, and procedures often recommended to treat the conditions plant-based nutrition can help us avoid. The research shows our bodies do a wonderful job of healing themselves if we stop damaging them daily with poor nutrition and start giving them the nutrition that they need to heal and function optimally. It's truly remarkable. Now, let me tell you what's in store for you tonight. We're going to see about a 3-minute video between two speakers. First, we'll hear comments from our PB Now Medical Director, Cardiologist, Dr. Joshua Liberman. Next, we'll see that short 3-minute video. And after the video, our featured speaker, Becky Schultz, will begin, and she'll follow her talk with Q&A. Our program should end like it usually does at 7:30, if not before. And as a reminder, we have meetings every month, normally every month, except for last month, usually on the second Thursday of the month at 6 p.m. Central Time. Next month, we'll hear from Florida cardiologist, Dr. Kushik Reddy. We'll be posting more information about our upcoming meetings on our website. Again, that's pbnow.org. If you register on the website, you'll receive email reminders of our events as they approach. And lastly, a quick technical note. During the meeting, everyone but the speakers will be muted, and we ask that you stay that way to avoid background noise and allow everyone to hear the speakers. And I guess that wasn't lastly, 2 more short things. We'll be using the chat box for questions and participation when we get to the Q&A. And for those who are new to Zoom, and I imagine that's almost none of you at this point, you can, I suggest that you go to your, to the spot that allows you to choose what way you want to view this, and make sure that you set that for the speaker mode, so that when the speakers are talking, they fill up your whole screen and you can see any charts or anything that they're trying to show you. With that, let's go to our first speaker. Our first speaker tonight is a fellowship-trained cardiologist practicing cardiology with Ascension here in Milwaukee. He's past president and current trustee of the Wisconsin chapter of the American College of Cardiology. He's a member of the American College of Cardiology's National Nutrition and Lifestyle Work Group, whose membership includes nationally known physicians such as Dr. Dean Ornish, Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, and Dr. Neil Bernard. He's an advocate for the use of plant-based nutrition to help improve heart health, general health, and quality of life, and has seen the benefits of plant-based nutrition in both his personal life and that of his patients. We're fortunate to have him practicing here in Milwaukee and as our PV Now medical director. I'm happy to welcome Dr. Joshua Liberman. Dr. Liberman.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for the kind introduction as usual. I haven't been on a couple of these last calls for multiple different reasons, so I appreciate, excuse me, sorry, being back. It's good to see everybody. I know it's hard in summer. A lot of people are out of town for summer, and even though these are on Zoom, it's not necessarily first, top of mind to be on these calls. So appreciate everybody for being here, and appreciate speakers, Becky Schultz, Rebecca. Glad you could be with us, and looking forward to hearing from you on your approach and your perspective on healthy eating and nutrition. So as a lot of you know, I like to talk about, just my personal experience and in my practice about what we've seen and the results we see. And, there's a wide range of things that we see, from people who have been on the plant-based path on their own and come to me because they're looking for somebody just to give them some further advice, or for people who are coming to me because they've been diagnosed with heart disease and they just randomly show up in my office, not knowing that I can potentially help them find a path that's alternative to the medications and interventions kind of approach to things. Just yesterday, I saw a patient who actually was a guy who had been a professional basketball player, but in European leagues and in Australian leagues. So big, huge, tall, muscular guy who had severe hypertension, and was finally getting serious about it. There's been some strokes in his family, and he showed up with his wife. He had actually played college ball at I think New Mexico State. So he's good basketball player, D1, made a career out of it, but unfortunately never really took his health that seriously. And already we were starting to see maybe some evidence that high blood pressure had been taking a toll. And this is a guy who told me even from the first start, when I started asking about his diet, he's like, well, he's like, I have a steak addiction, doc, and he's just talking about all the different things he ate, and he and his wife, they have bacon or sausage almost every morning for breakfast and all these kinds of things. And so we started talking about the role that these things were having on his health, and specifically on his blood pressure, but overall on his heart health and his stroke risk. And I think that sometimes I work with medical students, sometimes I work with medical residents, people in the family medicine training program. And they come to me and sometimes, afterwards they'll say, I never would have thought that guy would have been open or receptive to listening to, to changing nutrition. But, when I walked in and especially when this guy said, he eats, red meat multiple times a week and eats, processed meat almost every morning for breakfast with his wife, the first impression you might get is it's going to be very hard for this guy to change. It's going to be very hard for him to make the changes necessary to bring down his blood pressure without having to rely on multiple medications. But to his credit, he was very receptive to it. We talked, he said, he had that kind of look in your face when when you realize that everything you've been doing up until now could be wrong. And it was kind of, one of those mind-blowing experiences for him. But over the course of, just a 20 to 30 minute conversation, I think I impressed upon him, the benefits of moving towards, making huge strides towards a more plant-based diet. And by the end of the talk, he had been convinced, and I'm not trying to say this is that I have some magical approach or anything like that, but I guess what I'm really trying to raise is that there's plenty of people out there that you may have in your life that you may not think that they can make the change, or you just look at them and you say, oh man, that person's in trouble. And I'm not trying to say that you should go nagging them or proselytizing them or bothering them or anything like that. But I think that just by providing education, by inviting them to meetings like this, by providing resources, making them aware of different things, people in your lives, that even if you think that you can't make a change, you'd be surprised. Different people come to this at different points in their life, and you'd be surprised that something that somebody may have heard a year ago may be very relevant when they find out that that they may be diagnosed with early stage prostate cancer, right? For example, and all of a sudden a bell rings in their head and says, "Oh my God, wait a minute! I remember somebody telling me, or me, you know, that I read something recently that prostate cancer can be reversed with a plant-based diet." And so you never know. So you know, I recommend that everybody out there just be positive, lead by example, and hopefully, if you're not plant-based on this, you know, and you're joining us on these Zoom calls. Just keep an open mind and know that the evidence is really, almost incontrovertible at this point, that of the health benefits of a plant-based diet. The other thing I usually like to talk about when I have an opportunity is some evidence from the literature, right? And every week there's something new that comes out, so it's always hard to choose one thing to really highlight. But this really went in. Completely in line with the patient that I just saw, who was struggling with blood pressure control and didn't realize that it was that a significant portion of his difficult to control blood pressure, or his high blood pressure, was from his diet itself. And there was a study that came out in the European Journal of Cardiology, which is a nice respectable journal. The European Society of Cardiology is a very is a very evidence-based society. They do a lot of good research, and they have a lot of really good guidelines. But a study that came out that was based in the UK, so Scotland, Wales, and England, they looked at what's called the UK Biobank study, which is this huge database. It's like 500,000 people in it, and they just collect a whole bunch of information on these people. And one of the piece of information that they were collecting was the question: do you add salt to your food? And they specifically said not during cooking. They're not talking about the salt that you normally add just as part of the recipe, but they're talking specifically about, do you use a salt shaker after the food is delivered to your table, or after you bring your food to your spouse or your kids or whatever. And people who answered yes to that question, the people who answered say that they did it the most, had the highest risk of premature mortality. So let me let that sink in for a second. Dying, not just high blood pressure, not just the things that we think as predictors of mortality, but actual true mortality. People who add salt to the food once it arrives on their table, which only actually represents about 10 to 15% of the salt in our diets. Most of the salt in our diets comes from what's already in the food. And that's also true for people who eat a plant-based diet, because unless you're doing truly a natural whole foods plant-based approach, if you're depending on a lot of these fake meat things, or tofurkey, or these kind of seasoned soy, fake meat products, that kind of stuff, there's going to be a lot of sodium in that stuff, right? Impossible Burgers have a ton of sodium. Boca Burgers, all these kinds of things have a ton of Beyond Meat has a ton of sodium in it. Now, again, we're not really talking about the sodium in the food, although you have to be aware of that too. But just adding salt to your food at the dinner table, which is not antithetical to plant-based eating. You can certainly be a plant-based eater and add salt to your food. But if you do that, understand that there's a true health detriment to that. That there's an increased risk of premature mortality by adding salt to your food. And the people who did the most of this had a 28% higher risk of premature mortality. 28%. And all the quintiles, so when you divide it into 5 groups, all of them were increasing up until that maximum. So it suggests that this really is a true effect, right? Because if one of them was neutral or negative, you'd say, oh, maybe this isn't the real effect. But there was an increasing risk based on increasing salt intake, again, added to food at the table, not from what you cook necessarily. So I think it's important to point out that I did spend a good amount of time talking to this gentleman just yesterday about salt intake and trying to decrease and be conscious of it, because that's a super easy way you can control blood pressure. And I've talked about sodium intake before, but boy, it's just so prevalent, and I have so many conversations every day that I think it's worth bringing up each time. So with that, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you much for being here, and looking forward to hearing the other speakers.
Thanks, Josh. That's outstanding. But what a great warning. There is a question here too. It says, how do you and this is from Carol, how do you and other plant-based doctors handle a reduction in medications? And she's got a follow-up question too. And the follow-up is, what should a patient do when your doctor says you'll be on blood pressure meds for life? How can we help a doctor be open-minded?
It's a perfect question. It's a difficult question to answer. Not all doctors are the same. Some are more, some have better bedside manners, some have worse, right? Some are better skilled with their hands, some aren't. Some are more open-minded than others, and others aren't, right? So just like in any field, policemen, lawyers, garbage men, there's going to be a whole range of people that go into that profession. I would say that the most direct and most effective approach is to come armed with data, right? So if you go to your doctor and you really want to get off medications, prove that you don't need the medications, right? So get a blood pressure cuff to have at home, right? Measure your blood pressure on a daily basis or every other day basis. You don't have to do it multiple times a day if you don't want, but come with data. And if you can show your doctor, if you say, hey doc, I know you've been saying that I'm going to be on blood pressure medications for life, but here's a list of my blood pressures. Here's what my blood pressures have been for the last month, and they're all on the low side. What do you think about me stopping one of the two medicines, one of the three medicines I'm on, and seeing what my blood pressure is? I can't imagine a good doctor out there that would say no to that, right? You can't possibly say, here are my blood pressures at home. They're well controlled. In fact, they're lower than they need to be. I want to decrease medicine. If a doctor says, I don't care what those blood pressures are, then frankly, you need to find another doctor. I'm sorry. There's just nobody that should look at that data that you're providing and just ignore it, right? And that's what they would be doing if they said, no, you're stuck on these medicines for life. It's just not the case. I have patients all the time that are able to get off medications. I have patients that need more medications, right? It just depends on the situation you have at hand. It just depends on the facts on the ground. And so I tell my patients, check your blood pressures at home, bring them to me with every visit. Check them for a week or two before you come with me, bring them. And if they're running low, and I empower my patients, I say, listen, if they're running low, stop the medicine on your own. Almost all these medicines you can just stop, right? There are some that you need to wean yourself off, especially on your very high doses. But I say, Mrs. Smith, with this medication, if you continue to eat this way and you continue to lose weight and you continue to avoid salt and you continue to get healthy, your blood pressure may go too low. If that's the case, let's stop a medication and be in touch with me. So I would just say, the easiest answer is come with data, come armed with data. And if you do that, there's no one that can or should ignore that data that you provide.
We've got one more question, and I imagine we could maybe take one more after that if somebody wants to ask, but then this is from Cindy, and she asks, are fib episodes related to diet?
Yeah, atrial fibrillation is an abnormal heartbeat. It's a very, there's lots of different kinds of abnormal heartbeats. This is a very specific one that has very specific consequences and implications. We do know that atrial fibrillation is linked to lots of different things. It's linked to aging, which is probably the most common. It's linked to high blood pressure. It's linked to thyroid issues. It's linked to sleep apnea, but it is also linked to obesity. Patients who are overweight or obese have higher incidence of atrial fibrillation. So I can't tell you that there is a specific food that causes atrial fibrillation. I'd love to be able to say to my patients, listen, bacon is going to cause you to have AFib. Stop eating bacon. I want them to eat bacon. I want them to stop eating bacon for lots of reasons, but I'm not going to lie or stretch the truth and say bacon is going to cause you to eat AFib. I know of no data that shows that, specifically some specific item is related to AFib, but it is also very well substantiated by lots of data that obesity is related to AFib, that sleep apnea is related to AFib, and that high blood pressure is related to AFib. And guess what? All those things are also related to, right? High blood pressure is clearly linked to processed meat intake, right? High blood pressure is linked to lots of different things that can be bad in your diet. So if you want to try to, if you have atrial fibrillation and you want to try to reduce the burden of it, sure, eating a whole foods plant-based diet, I have no doubt that it would help. Do I have data that proves that specifically? I don't actually, but I have no doubt that it would help reduce incidence of AFib if you start eating a healthier diet. And I have no problem telling a patient that they need to reduce their sodium intake because ultimately, it will lower their blood pressure if they do that, which lowers their ultimate risk for having AFib. So I hope that answers the question a little bit, but also trying to be honest with the answer.
Thanks, Dr. Lieberman. That's outstanding and great information. And we are going to jump to the video here. See if I can get this up here. Bear with me. I think it should be showing up. Here we go.
In 2013, a nutritional update for physicians was published in the official journal of Kaiser Permanente, the largest managed care organization in the United States, which covers about 9 million people with about 15,000 physicians who were told that healthy eating may be best achieved with a plant-based diet, defined as a regimen that encourages whole plant-based foods and discourages meat, dairy, eggs, as well as all refined and processed junk. Too often, physicians ignore the potential benefits of good nutrition and quickly prescribe medications instead of giving patients a chance to correct their disease through healthy eating and active living. Physicians should therefore consider recommending a plant-based diet to all of their patients, especially those with high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, or obesity. The major downside is that it may work a little too well. If people are on medications, their blood pressure or blood sugar could actually drop too low. So physicians may need to adjust medications or eliminate them altogether. Despite the strong body of evidence favoring plant-based diets, many physicians are not stressing the importance of plant-based diets as a first-line treatment for chronic diseases. This could be because of a lack of physician awareness or a lack of patient education resources. So, Kaiser sought to change that. Want to lose weight, feel better, improve, stabilize, or even reverse chronic disease? Get off some of your medications? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then a plant-based eating plan may be right for you. Side effects may include lower cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood sugar, reversal or prevention of our #1 killer, a longer life, healthier weight, lower risk of cancer, diabetes, may even slow the progression of certain types of cancer, and improve inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. They offer tips to get started, meal plan ideas, and I'm honored to say, a good taste in websites. The paper ends with a familiar refrain: further research is needed. In this case, though, further research is needed to find ways to make plant-based diets the new normal for our patients and employees.
I think we are back. Are we back here? All right, let me just get the, I haven't enlarged the screen all the way. So everybody can hear. It's interesting that touched on a couple of things you were just talking about, Dr. Lieberman, and the questions that were asked. So we now are going to go.
Sorry to interrupt. I just want to add, I mean, no question. I really want to highlight, and actually, Dr. Kreger didn't even highlight that. The quote said that we don't, we assume that our patients, and we have we don't think that our patients are willing to do it, despite a general willingness when they interview actual patients themselves. And so I think that highlights the point that I was trying to make with my patients, that you might walk in and see this big strapping guy who used to play basketball and he's all muscular and he says he loves eating steak, and you might say, you know, this guy's just not even going to be willing. I won't even start talking about it. And sure enough, it was the exact opposite. So
thanks for that. Is this full screen? Okay, great. We'll go to our featured speaker. Our featured speaker tonight has been a board certified family nurse practitioner, counseling and treating patients for close to 30 years now. She's been an adjunct clinical professor with the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, Public Health Department in Family Medicine. She's a special editor for Family and Integrative Medicine with the Journal for Patient-Centered Research and Review. And she has a long list of professional accomplishments. In 2015 and 16, she received 2 alumni awards from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. One of them is the Community Service Award from the UW-Milwaukee Alumni Association. And the other was she received a Distinguished Alumni Award in conjunction with the College of Nursing's 50th anniversary. I'm happy to welcome her to speak with us tonight. Please welcome Becky Schultz. Becky?
Hi, and nice to see everybody or see your names. I see some people that I'm familiar with, and I just want to compliment and congratulate Terry with doing such a great job with founding the PB Now and running it. You do such an amazing job. And Dr. Lieberman, you sing to my heart, literally, with regard to what you're doing. Obviously, I worked in family medicine for many years, and part of that was with education with residents. And as you know, they don't get a lot of education of nutrition in medical schools. Some do if they're osteopaths, they get a little bit more, I think, than medical doctors. And I am integrative medicine fellowship trained through the University of Arizona. So there's a lot of nutrition in that. And we, one of the things that I was really involved with was integrative medicine in residency curriculum oversight with another fellowship trained physician that I worked with. And so just love what you're saying and talking about how practical applications, and then listening to Dr. Greger, and he's such a character, but so well versed in the literature. If you haven't ever gone to his website, nutritionfacts.org, he's just got a great way to address things. So it's fun. One person that we actually invited to St. Luke's which is known for its cardiology. I don't know that there's a lot of people that do plant-based there. There are a few within the Advocate Aurora system. But one time we hosted Dr. Stephen DeVries from the Gaples Institute out of the Chicago area. He was one of our lead cardiologists with the integrative medicine. And he came and he spoke one time on interventional cardiology with the fork. So it was just great because, you know, he was there and that was fun. Ironically, though, the food that we tried to get didn't get there, and the food that we served, it was kind of embarrassing. So nonetheless, you know, we're always trying to work uphill, and I agree that patients are interested in doing this. And I think some of the times that I've seen that they struggle with is they're concerned that they may have to give up really delicious food, and really nutritious, wonderful, healing food can be very delicious too. And I think that's one of the things that they want to know about. A couple of quick cases that I have that I was involved with is one of my patients that was struggling with weight issues and had really a lot of the weight related dysmetabolic issues of diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, central adiposity, and just didn't feel very well. And so we worked on things, and he changed over significantly to plant-based pretty quickly. And we had to drop a lot of his medications rather quickly for blood pressure and diabetes. And it was really fun to see someone engage in such a way. And that's always really gratifying for both the patient, family, and certainly the clinicians as well. And then on a personal family note, one of my sisters had precancerous changes in a mammogram, and there was debate as to whether this site should be removed or what was to be done. And I talked with her about dietary changes, and she made significant lifestyle changes, especially around diet, and just really went plant-based. And not only did she lose about 30 or 40 pounds, but she never did have any surgical procedure or any kind of procedure. It was just kind of a watchful waiting. And sometimes watchful waiting in healthcare means to just follow up in a few months, but not always telling people what to do. And we know that food can be functional or dysfunctional. And so I really think that it's really important for us as clinicians, and of course as patients, and being proactive for our own care, looking at the functional food. But anyway, she was able to reverse everything. They couldn't see it on mammogram anymore, couldn't see it on the MRIs anymore. And she's almost 5 years out now, which is really powerful. And one of my absolute favorite things, in addition to doing integrative primary care, I did integrative consults and specialized in the area of integrative oncology, where one of the breast surgeons that I told that I just finished my fellowship, she started referring a lot of people to me. I worked with a lot of women that wanted to either sometimes men too, but mostly women, that either reduce their primary risk or their secondary risk, or to deal with what they were going through at the time. And much of it was food-based. And I would have to say that, unfortunately, sometimes in cancer centers, some of the treats that they put out are not always the treats that we would want people to have. And one of my favorite books is Cancer Healing Kitchen and One Bite at a Time by Rebecca Katz, who talks about lots of things that you can eat instead. Because sometimes people think, well, we got to eat just anything to keep the weight on. And I don't think that's true. And the literature supports that when you eat pro-inflammatory foods, especially high glycemic load, you increase your insulin and your insulin-like growth factor because your blood sugar goes up. It's very pro-inflammatory. And that insulin-like growth factor will potentially can trigger the initiation and the progression and promotion of cancer. So it's really important for people to know that. And it's really fun to work with people and help people make those changes. So Terry asked me just a couple of weeks ago to replace someone that was scheduled. So some of you might have thought there was somebody else speaking tonight. And so I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share with you. I am, in addition to being an integrated and holistic family nurse practitioner, I'm also a registered herbalist with the American Herbal Guild, which I love, love, love the plants. And I think that's what we're talking about, plant-based medicine. And I love to use it from a food as medicine, which I was going to call it herbal medicine or botanical medicine, but Terry changed the name to food as medicine. So that's okay, because that's what really so much of what we're doing about. He did not wish for me to be showing you tinctures and things like that, which I love to do as well. But I think that I'm going to be sharing with you shortly kind of a day in the life of an integrative herbalist from just practical applications and opportunities for you and patients to learn from as well. So I will start sharing my screen. Is there any question before I begin, Terry, or should we just get going?
Go right ahead, Becky.
Okay, and I also want to welcome you to my kitchen, my backyard, which is over here, and to my and beyond. So when I actually do virtual herbal medicine making from my kitchen, backyard, and beyond, there's so much that you can do from your kitchen and your backyard. And right now in Wisconsin and pretty much all over the country in northern hemisphere, we have this opportunity to have our backyards turned into gardens. And sometimes people have herbal gardens in their house and the culinary herbal gardens in their house too. And then as an herbalist, I love getting out and getting some of the plants that are wild and learning more about some of the edible foods in addition to the herbal medicines as well. So let me see if I can share with you. Am I sharing, Terry?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Looks great.
All right. So what we're doing now is just talking about this nutritiously delicious day in the life of an integrative and holistic family nurse practitioner and herbalist. And so I love photos. And so I think, they always say that pictures are worth 1,000 words. And this burger over here is homemade. It doesn't have all the things that that Dr. Lieberman was talking about, some of the processed burgers have, which is really, really wonderful. So what I hope to share with you during this session is it's somewhat formal but informal. I just wanted to have something to kind of follow. But so I'm going to talk with you with the slides. And I want to describe what is integrative, holistic, and herbal medicine, what's plant or herbal medicine, identify some basic plant nutrient and constituents that many people are aware of, most of those, but some of the other ones as well, and then share this deliciously nutritious day that I have. So integrative medicine is really, it's really a philosophical approach to the way that we approach our lives and our care that we have when we're clinicians. And it's looking at us as whole persons. So it's really about the mind, body, and spirit. It's based in the evidence. Especially, we want more stringent evidence for things that may have a higher risk, and for both the efficacy of it as well as the safety. If something isn't as risky, then maybe we don't need to have as much evidence. But as you heard Dr. Lieberman say, and Terry was telling me that 2 months ago, we had another physician from cardiology, and I'm blanking on his name, and Terry can tell us, he can speak up or talk with us later, that he goes through annually, like all the literature on that is evidence with regard to the plants.
Dr. Andrew Freeman,
Dr.
From Denver.
Andrew Freeman, and you can go back into the,
cardiologist from Denver.
and you can go back into the PB Now website and go look at those videos. But it's evidence-based, and it's looking at using conventional Western healthcare along with some of the things that we don't learn, and oftentimes don't learn in Western trained schools. So, and it really incorporates the use of person-centered care, again, where Dr. Lieberman was saying he really wants to invite the patients that he's serving to come to the table and really partner with them to learn how to best help them make a shared decision-making with their health that ultimately will lead them to health. And there's a lot of focus on lifestyle medicine, and obviously nutrition is one of those core self-care practices. So that's what integrative and holistic medicine is looking at the person holistically and bringing the integrated of it. It's not an either or, and we heard Dr. Lieberman talking about sometimes he can lower the medicines and sometimes he needs to add those. And so I've had a patient one time, she really is, her daughter is a nurse and trained in integrative care, and she really wanted to get off of her medicines. And we talked about a rational way about going about this with nutrition and all of this. And one day she came in and her blood pressure was like 170 over 100. And we went and talked about what was going on within her, with what she had done. And she had just quit almost everything. And we had, and this is a really bright woman, and she just didn't want to do it anymore with the medicines. But we talked about the risks associated with not having well-controlled blood pressure. And we were able to go back on some and then ultimately wean down to just maybe 1 or 2 instead of the 4 that she was on at pretty high doses. So anyway, so what is herbal medicine? Herbal medicine or plant medicine or botanical medicine is the art and science of using plants to support our health and wellness. So it could be health promotional aspects and wellness. It could be disease prevention and also potentially curing if we're thinking about that, and then also to help with some of the symptom management. It's been practiced for the millennia all over the world. Most cultures will know something about it. We kind of got this squashed in the early 20s with the Flexner activities that really just wanted to have strict biomedicine with the pharmaceutical model. And it's a big resurgence with herbal medicine. And I absolutely love it. And I love just being out in nature. And I think that just even being out in nature, there's benefits to looking at these things. It is a primary form of medicine with a written history of about 5,000 years. And prior to that, that's not written. And about 80% of the world's population, especially in developing country, use medicinal plants as their primary source of health care. And interestingly, over 50 people over 50 are using herbs and dietary supplements. So we're talking about whole plant-based herbal tonight, but there are supplements. And also, even if we do tinctures at home, they're still based on, or even if you buy them, they're still based on whole plants versus a standardized extract is really going down almost to a pharmaceutical agent because it's coming down to just a few of the constituents or maybe just one, and then it becomes more of a pharmaceutical agent. But many of the things that I do is more of a whole plant-based approach. So what's an herb? It's a plant or a plant part that's used in culinary or therapeutic value. So many of you probably have spices in your spice cabinet and you do or don't know how to use those very well. And I would encourage you to continue to explore it because it's a lot of fun. But it's either the above ground part, which would be the buds, flower, fruit, nut, seed, stem, leaf, or bark. And that would also be what we have in food. And it could be the below ground parts, such as the roots or the rhizomes, such as like potatoes and turmeric. A lot of times people think that turmeric and ginger are roots. They're actually rhizomes, which are underground plants, underground stems. And many of the world's herbal traditions also include things such as fungi, mineral, and animal substances in their practices when they use that. Some of these pictures, I took all of these pictures. We have echinacea and dandelion and St. John's wort and elderberry, and we have some fungi over here. This is chicken, not chicken of the woods. It's yeah, it's chicken of the woods. And it tastes like chicken if you cook it that way. It's really fun. There's burdock, there's butterfly weed, and there's cardinal flower. It's just really fun to look at these colors. And when you look at the colors, that's where we're going to talk more about some of the phytochemicals, but it comes from the plant pigments that give it the therapeutic qualities. So what is a plant-based diet? This is what this whole support group is about. That was originally in person, and Terry quickly pivoted along with everybody else in the world when COVID hit, and it went on online. So this is plant-based, and I never got a chance to go to the Shorewood one when I don't know if you're ever going to go back to that, Terry, but kind of fun to think about. But it includes basically minimally processed fruits, foods, and fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legume, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. It really pretty much eliminates the animal type products. And I think you know that. So when we take a whole plant, what we're thinking about is that it has, there's synergy with it versus if you just process the heck out of it and you get a powdered flour or you remove certain parts of it. So most people are familiar with the macronutrients. Most of us are aware of that. We think of the proteins, so some people are on high protein or low protein diets, carbs, high or low carb diets, which are maybe, then we want to think about the quality of that as a high glycemic load. Some people think about that, or a high or a low glycemic load. That just means how quickly it makes the blood sugar going up, and the more processed it is, generally is how that will make your blood sugar go up, which makes that whole metabolic cascade go for inflammatory processes. And then we've got the fats, and they're the saturated fats. They tend to be hard at room temperature. The polyunsaturated tend to be those omega-3 fatty acids that come from fish, but also chia and flax and hemp seeds, and then the monounsaturated, which comes from some of the nuts as well as like olive oil. And then we have the micronutrients, which are oftentimes people are aware of, that we have these fat soluble, the A, D, and E and K. Those are the vitamins. I forgot to say vitamins. The micronutrients are vitamins. And then the water soluble vitamins, which would be the B's and the C's. And again, this is why we want to have, oftentimes, if we can get organic, for a couple reasons. One, we get rid of the pesticides, but also the plants have to fight a little harder to survive. And we want good soil for them to be able to have the good nutrients. So there's some evidence to show that you have a higher nutrient. You always have to be a little cautious because some people may not be able to afford organic. I think organic is getting more cost available in more ways that people can afford that. And then there are these secondary plant constituents that come from the pigments. So when people talk about eating the rainbow of the food, you want to also not only have the varied in color, but you want to have varied in type of food and varied in textures and smells and tastes, because it provides a wide array of these plant constituents that we're talking about, and they have different benefits to the body. So we look at the rainbow, the red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, and violet, or Roy G. Biv, that we all probably learned about in basic science classes. And this is what these phytochemicals are, what give the plant its therapeutic properties, which is so fun to know that we're getting these therapeutic properties. And we heard about those with Dr. Greger and Dr. Lieberman talking about those. And you have the blueberries and the green tea. You got the anthocyanins with the dark purple, blue, red. That's that pigment that's in there. And you've got green tea with the catechins in it, but you also have protein and caffeine and L-theanine. Turmeric, it's oftentimes the curcuminoids, and the ginger, it's the phenolics and terpenes. There are other things in these plants as well, but these are some of the, I'm just hitting some common things that people know about, but all plants have different chemicals in them. And when we take the whole plant, we're getting, again, that synergy of all these different plant chemicals that work together versus just a really high amount of, like, if somebody just takes caffeinated gum, and you're just getting the caffeine, you're not getting the benefits of the green tea or the coffee. So coffee is also got some really wonderful benefits. And then here's just some things that it talks about that, you know, there's what's in like a blueberry, there's vitamin K, vitamin C, copper, manganese. These things are in fiber. It's important for bowel movements and immunity and bone health and blood sugar regulation and cardiovascular support. And we know that the blueberries, especially that anthocyanidin aspect of it, and any of the purple blueberries are good for the blood vessels, both in the vessels in our heart, but also our eyes. So really a wonderful thing to be considering and including daily into your diet, these colors. It also can improve our cognition. And certainly we like to have a bright brain, helps with blood pressure, and has some antioxidant. Turmeric, this is this underground rhizome. People often say it's a root. This is the fresh on the left side, and it's called curcuma longa. It's also often nice to know what the plant's genus and species name, because then you know what you have. There are many different species. Curcuma is the genus and longa is the species. And then this just shows all of the amazing benefits. And there's so much research out there, but it has antioxidant, anti-inflammation. So all this inflammation that we're talking about, I had a frozen shoulder a few years ago, and I spoke with one of my friends who is a pain physician out in the West Coast, and she had written a book on pain, and I just happened to get her book, and I texted her. I said, "Oh, this makes sense to me." And she goes, "Don't have any of this stuff done. I'll call you." And she spent like 90 minutes on the phone, and she told me about golden milk. This is probably about 7 years ago, I think. And within 3 days, my pain, I only took like a leave a couple of days, and I didn't go for any kind of shots. I did do a lot of work to get my frozen shoulder unfrozen. But anyway, anti-inflammatory, anti-dementia, anti-pulmonary, fibrous aspects, anti-tumor, very good for people who are cancer risk reduction. Again, Dr. Lieberman talked about prostate cancer and other cancers. It can help to reduce this. This doesn't mean that you don't go and get other things taken care of with the cancer, but cardiovascular, immune modulating, anti-lipid issues, and on it goes. Here's green tea. This is Camellia sinensis. And a lot of times people will refer to tea as tea, but it's actually what we call a tisane. It's a water infused, usually heat infused water drink from many different kinds of plants. But actually, when you're talking about tea, it's usually referred to as green tea, which is Camellia sinensis, which grows in oftentimes in the area of China, India, Sri Lanka, Argentina, Japan. And you want to get organic on this. It's oftentimes, if it comes from China, it can be highly pesticided, and those pesticides can be really damaging, toxic to us from the liver, can be cancer promoting. They act like antibiotics in our gut, and we know how important that the gut is to our overall health. But look at how it decreases COX-2. When you think about using Aleve or ibuprofen, this is something that works in that area, and FNP-B is involved with a lot of the processes of cancer, oxidative stress that can increase atherogenic aspects in our vessels, cancer cell proliferation, increase our immune system, and anti-angiogenesis, which is the blood vessel creation that can support tumor growth, anti-inflammation, apoptotic pathways in cancer, which means it helps to increase the programmed cell death and helps with DNA repair. So really, it's coming from the polyphenols, which are those EGCGs, and then we go on to ginger. Again, I'm just going to give you a few foods that have this, but look at all of the chemical constituents that are in here. The biologic therapeutic actions, and it's mostly coming from the phenolic compounds, but there are many other compounds in here. Neuroprotective, anti-inflammatory. I use this a lot when I think I might be getting a respiratory infection. I'll make a ginger lemonade, and more recently I've been adding some burdock to it and some other spices which make it really taste well, and then mix it with some sparkling water that just is really fun. But you can see again, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, protective in the respiratory disorders, both for asthma and acute, anti-diabetic properties, anti-cancer, antimicrobial, etc., neuroprotective. So, excuse me, got a little bit of a hoarse voice here. I'm going to just take a drink, and I don't know if you can see what I have here. I have a clear glass, and there's some peppermint leaves. This is fresh peppermint from one of my pots. It's actually, so it's mentha peperita, and it's a cold water infusion. Probably don't get a lot of the plant chemicals out of here, but you can taste it. It's a really fresh way to drink water. And some of my patients that want to go off of sodas and they don't really like water, it's just a really great way to do it, and really tastes good. It went down the wrong pipe. Sorry about that. Okay, so when we think of herbal medicine, they have many different actions and properties that are therapeutic. Some of these, and I didn't put all of them up here. If you want to go and learn more about the therapeutic actions, you can go to the American Herbal Guild and look under the resources, and it'll tell you what they all are. But some of these are familiar to us, such as like antimicrobial, and maybe something like hypotensive, meaning lowering the blood pressure, or a diuretic, which helps to lower, make you excrete more water, but an antioxidants and antitussive for cough. But some things we don't always hear about, like a demulcent, which helps with soothing and healing the mucous membrane. Maybe a nervine. We know about this. In effect, a stimulant nervine would be something like caffeine, and that comes from a variety of plants, but most people know about it from coffee. But we also have relaxing nervines, and I have actually over here brewing right now Matricaria camellia. It used to be called Matricaria recutita. It's also known as that, but it's chamomile, very relaxing nervine relaxant, but chamomile also has anti-inflammatory properties. We have cholagogue and choleretic and diaphoretics, which help if you have a fever. It helps to break the fever, unlike what happens when you use maybe Tylenol or ibuprofen. It helps to nourish what's going on as well. So now we're looking at food as medicine. It's the foundation of good health. Really, when we talk about it, and again, Dr. Lieberman mentioned it, Dr. Gregor talked about it, and most of us in integrative medicine, most of all of us know about this, and the plant-based nutrition certainly. Terry became so knowledgeable about this that he became so motivated to talk about food as medicine and bring the PBNOW here. But it is a foundation of good health. It's really not just about the pill, because the pill really only helps to handle the symptoms. It's not getting at the core underlying problem. And you can the diversity of the color, food, flavors, smell, etc. So this doesn't have a lot of plants in it, at least that you can see, but over on the edge by the sun, there is some land over here. And I think that plants come from nature, and we are from nature. And so I think whenever we think about going to the plants, it's important to embrace nature. If you can't get outside, look outside. If you don't have a window to look outside, get a picture, or look on your phone, or something that can enhance the healing properties of nature. And I think when we start to before we eat, we might want to be thinking about, and throughout our day, having a sense of gratitude and blessings before meals. And this is a really interesting research that Dr. Masaru Emoto, a Japanese scientist, that he would pray or say good things or bad things over water. And water, it has its three phases of the liquid, the gaseous, and the frozen. And when he froze it, he took pictures of it. And look, when they said, "I kill you," look at how deformed this crystal is. Look how deformed when they were looking before they did prayer on it, and then after they did prayer on it over here, how pretty the crystal is. And then this is John Lennon and Mozart, and somehow some with peace and saying love and things like that to it. So pretty cool. And why is this important? One is, I just think we are mind, body, spirit, and so we want to be thinking about how does what we do with our food, with our bodies, and we're like 60, 70, 80% water, and our food has a lot of water in it too, and that's why it's good to eat fresh fruits and vegetables, and even frozen, because they have a lot of water in them, and it can change. Look at this. Isn't this just fascinating how it can change it? So this is changing the structure of it. And then we have the chemistry of what we're doing with the food as well. We want to be hydrating, and some people like to start their day in the morning with some lemon water. And again, lemon or cucumber or whatever, an infused water can make it easier to drink if you don't like to just drink plain water. I do think it's important to do filter water if you can, just because of the chlorine and the fluoride and things like that that's in there. And some people, when they filter, they also put mineral, like a packet of mineral, and I don't do it, but I think it's probably a good idea. Otherwise, it's kind of just a flat water. So, all right, here's breakfast. And wow, how inviting is this? Look at this beautiful color. This, you may not be able to tell everything, so I'm going to just, I've written it here, but it's steel cut oats. And so steel cut oats is a good idea to get organic, because oats tend to be highly pesticided. And Terry, I'm just going to ask you a question. How much time do I have? Because I want to make sure that we go to 7:15 or?
Sure, 7:10, 7:15, that'd be great, Becky.
Okay. So this is just showing that you want to have like steel cut oats, and if you have steel cut oats versus the rolled oats, it's a little bit more in its whole state, where there's still the fiber around it, and it's got a lower glycemic load and lower glycemic index, so it's not going to raise your blood sugar as much. Now, if you have any problems with gluten, you want to get gluten-free, or sometimes some people may even want to go maybe use a different type of a seed or grain for your breakfast bowl if you want that. Then I've got blueberries and cherries, and all of these are organic. There's some nuts, there's hemp seeds, chia seeds, there's some elderberry syrup, so that kind of purpley on there. I wildcraft elderberry, and elderberry has all those anthocyanidins. If you ever go out and wild harvest it, you want to make sure, first of all, that you know what you're getting, because you could identify the wrong berry and you could get into trouble with berries if you eat the wrong one. You also want to know to harvest it when it's dark purple, almost black, not when it's green or pink or kind of red. You want to get it almost dark black, but it's Sambuca nigra is what the European is. In Canada and in North America, we call it Sambuca canadensis. This has antiviral and immune modulating benefits. And so I'll use it both prophylactically, meaning preventatively, or therapeutically, treatment-wise, if I think that I'm getting colds or respiratory infections. And I know that the way that I do these things, I've been exposed and I think I'm getting sick. And the things that I do herbally wise really are really wonderful. So in that, there's a wide amount of not only the berries, but I have fresh turmeric and ginger rhizomes. I've got anise, star anise, which actually has shimizic acid in it. I may be saying that wrong, but that's a starter for Tamiflu, which is a prescription medicine that sometimes is used early on in like influenza. I also have clove and cardamom and allspice and black pepper, and sometimes I put a little bit of lemon in there. So just there, look what's all in here. And then I have a morning blend. It's like I have a morning blend, but you can use it throughout the day. There's cinnamon, cardamom, clove, ginger, all those kind of things as well. And I might sprinkle that on a variety of things, put it in a smoothie, put it in some medicinal balls that I make. And sometimes I add reishi to this, which is not a plant, it's a mushroom, and it has a lot of immune modulating. It's also what we call an adaptogen. And an adaptogen is something that helps us to adapt to stressors. So it could be physical or emotional stressors. And astragalus is both, it can also be considered an adaptogen, but it's an immune modulator, specifically has an affinity towards the respiratory system. And it can also help with white blood cells that may go down with chemotherapy. And then a glass of water and a pretty mentha paprika to just make it look pretty and appetizing. And I think we should make our food look appetizing, because it's enticing that way, and it's fun, and it's giving a self-care to us. This is showing cold infused water, which I just shared with you what I was drinking. This is again mentha paprika. Mentha paprika has calmative, it's calming nervine. It's a It has some stomachic or carminative benefits. It helps with the stomach to settle it down. But if somebody has gastric esophageal reflux, it can loosen the lower esophageal sphincter and can cause maybe some of the acid to go back up. So you want to be careful with that. Some people use the essential oils for lower intestinal problems with irritable bowel syndrome because it's very antispasmodic. You can also use this topically and inhale it as well for respiratory because it's antispasmodic and antimicrobial. Here's a lovely lunch. I just had this one yesterday, and this is lots of greens, locally grown. I got these at the farmer's market, but I have some greens now that are ready for me. I got my garden in a little bit late, but there's garbanzo beans in there for additional proteins, nuts, hemp, chia seeds, ginger, again, anti-inflammatory, antiviral, tastes really yummy. Berries, apples, sauerkraut. I put a little bit of that in there because there's probiotic. Dill, I said ginger twice. I must have wanted to make sure we knew that. Mint and basil. So I just kind of throw a lot of different things in there. And then it's topped off with a fire cider vinaigrette, which is been developed and really well known with Rosemary Gladstar, who is an amazing leader in Western herbal medicine. And what's in there, and this is the fire cider over here, which has organic vinegar in it, which then has ginger, fresh ginger, fresh turmeric, onion, garlic, jalapeno pepper. So you see why it's called fire. And then there's maybe some rosemary in there, and I think a whole lemon in there. And then you let it steep in there for about in the jar with the lid on for at least 3 weeks. And then you strain it, and you can just have it just as a vinegar if you want to. And by the way, vinegar is vinaigre. It means, it's a French word meaning soured wine. And so that's when you have your apple cider, it can get soured it gets changed to a wine. And then if it continues on with the fermentation process, then it goes into vinegar. And this is actually organic vinegar, apple cider vinegar. And you really want to get organic apples because they tend to be highly pesticided again. And because it was not heated, it still has what they call the mother in it. The mother is the probiotic, and probiotics are really important for health and immunity as well. And then you can see the pretty, the bread on there. I have some fresh dill. I have some fresh mint and basil as well. And then I made some, I ground my own millet seed and oats and made a oat bread. And then I just put a little bit of powdered onion and garlic on it. And sometimes I'll put a little bit of the vinaigrette that I put on it as well. So, I forgot to tell you, look at this top right here. This is so delicious. I mentioned it before, ginger burdock lemonade with star anise and allspice and water. It is so delicious. And the burdock root, it's really healing for the liver. It's detoxifying. And then the ginger has all of the benefits that we spoke about already. And then let's go on and either have this for your morning or your late mid-afternoon yummy drink. Here we have green tea matcha latte. So it's coming from the Camellia sinensis plant, and I put it in hemp milk. Sometimes I use soy. Soy is fine to use, and some people get worried about soy products. If you use the whole soy plant and organic, because it again gets to be highly pesticided, and it is not dangerous for people that have a hormone-based cancer. In fact, it actually works with like tamoxifen, and it acts like what we call a SERM, a selective estrogen receptor modulator, and it helps to reduce the cancers. But there was a fear of this a number of years ago, but there's a lot of evidence that show that it can be helpful. So I usually put honey in or coconut sugar. I know some people that are 100% plant-based don't like to use honey. And then vanilla has some benefits as well, including anti-angiogenesis. It's very tasty as well. It's gotten to be very expensive because I think some of the tropics, they've destroyed some of the forest where it's grown. And also I think it may have to be germinated by hand or whatever. But this is so yummy. It's so wonderful. And it's got the green tea benefits. All right. So here's a nice dinner. And it's really not that hard to make these patties, and it's with black beans. You can soak and make your own, cook them and make your own, or if you want to use canned, you can do it that way. Beans really need to be cooked thoroughly in order to use them. And then if you're getting a canned one, you really want to rinse it. It helps to reduce some of the gassy issues that people might have. And then I can also see putting some avocado on this would be really good, or maybe making some fresh pesto on here as well. And then here's a salad to go along with it, and a whole grain bread, and using the fire cider vinaigrette. And yum. This is showing the process of making an herbal smoothie. And there's the berries in here, blueberries, there's bananas. They were frozen. No, this was not a frozen one. It was just one that was getting kind of older, but you could use fresh, or you can use frozen, whatever. And you can, it's better to have it a little bit more ripened. And then the blueberries, the cherries, there's some fresh ginger in there. There's hemp seed. There's my morning blend I spoke with you about before. I don't think on the day that I made this, I had any nut milk with me. So I just used some filtered water. And then I put in ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is Withania somnifera. It is a root that you use for the most part, and it has adaptogenic benefits, and it helps with, especially people that can't maybe awaken in the middle of the night and can't go back. They're kind of wired and tired. So they're tired, but they have a lot of cortisol being pushed out which is part of that whole stress response, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, adrenal axis that starts in the brain when we're starting to either think about it, something that's making us stressed, or maybe we've had an injury or an illness. That whole pathway sets the adrenaline and the cortisol going. And this actually works in that pathway to lower the cortisol level with the ashwagandha. And I oftentimes put astragalus in there too, because we know that we're always being exposed to potential COVID, and it helps to immune modulate as well. And I'll have to tell you, this was really, really delicious. I think I threw some coconut in there as well. And then I put a little bit of peanut butter in it, and it was just really, really delicious. And then right before you go to bed, it's a good idea to maybe settle down, and you could have some settling tisane. As before I mentioned that they're often referred to as herbal teas, but the technical correct way of saying it is a tisane. And chamomile, we talked about it before. It's such a pretty delicate plant. It's pretty much an annual, and you use the above ground parts of it. So beautiful. And I just think it's therapeutic to look at these plants as well as to consume them internally. Or you can also use this topically for eczema, or perhaps inflammation, or dermatitis, or whatever. And you can do inhalation with it. And the essential oil really has some anti-inflammatory, anti-pain benefits to it. And then over here are my medicinal balls. And I used a nut butter. I used actually organic peanut butter, and it's a good idea to get organic because there can be some aflatoxins. I might be saying that incorrectly, but those are some toxins that can grow in the peanuts if they're not organic, or if they've been sitting around for a long time. But I put coconut and oats and dates. Sometimes I use honey. And again, kind of a lot of the same other things, but it's in the morning spice. And then I put astragalus in there, ashwagandha, sometimes some other adaptogens, sometimes some other dried herbs that I have, they're really, really delicious. So you can make your own little protein bars. And sometimes I put hemp or coconut or pea protein in here to give it a little bit more protein if you want to have that. They taste really, really good, and they're really nutritious. And one of my friends calls them Becky's balls, and she thinks that I should sell them because I give them to her every time I see her. I see her maybe a couple times a year up in Dark County. And another lovely drink that you can do, I mentioned it before, it's golden milk, and you can put a wide variety of things in this as well. I have both a powder that I purchased, and Gaia makes one. There's an herb shop here in Milwaukee that you can go to. I've made my own, and you can also use fresh, and this has anti-inflammatory properties. And it's really a nice ritual to have, to make this and to sit and maybe do a little bit of breathing, some gratitude, some contemplation, and just really taste and enjoy and have just some moment of relaxing, because we all can get kind of wound and keep going. And again, it's got that ashwagandha in here. I think I mentioned that as well. But you can put a wide variety of some of the other dried herbs as well, or fresh. So of course, many people know who Hippocrates is. Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine, sometime around 480, I think, and who's coined the term, and it's used very frequently in people that are foodies or people that really like to support eating healthy. And it's let thy food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. And so I think that we take that to heart with this group. And then I really like this little short history of medicine. 2000 BC, here, eat this root. 1000 BC, that root is heathen, say this prayer. 1850 AD, this prayer is superstition, drink this potion. 1940 AD, potion is snake oil, swallow this pill. Hold on a second. And then 1985, not so long ago, but for some people who weren't born yet, so that pill is ineffective, take this antibiotic. Of course, we know what the antibiotics do. We do need them at times, but we need to use them judiciously. And then of course, 2000, we became much more aware of the antibiotics that came around in the 30s, how we were overusing them. And not only were they becoming resistant, the organisms were becoming resistant to the antibiotics, but it was really harming us with the potential of our gut health. And so that antibiotic is artificial, although does come from some mold. Many of them, the penicillin first came from that. And here, eat this root. So these are some of my favorite plant-based cookbooks and herbal spice recipes. I could have gone in and showed you a whole lot more. I think I've got probably 100 on my shelf of a variety of herbs and cookbooks, but there's a lot, and I'm sure you could share yours as well. And then if you want to know a little bit more about safety information with regard to herbal medicine, you can go to the American Herbal Guild. There's that, and it just goes and shows you a lot as well. So that's it.
Becky, thank you so much for that excellent information and the colorful, very tasty looking daily regimen kind of that you go through. Let's open it up here for questions, and we have just a couple right away, and then I've got one or two. And don't hesitate either to go to the chat room and type in a question if you have a question, or if you put a thumbs up or the hand, I think it is, in the, trying to think where it is down here, in the reactions. There's the raised hand. And you can put the raised hand and then we can unmute. So the first question here was, can mint be boiled? Carol asked, can mint be boiled in water and used as tea, or should it only be cold infused in water?
So I didn't hear what could be boiled in water.
Can mint be boiled in water and used as tea, or should it only be cold infused in water?
That is such a great question. And thank you for asking me to clarify that. I think a lot of people aren't familiar with the process of using cold infusions, and it's such a wonderful way to have fresh, tasty water. But most people probably use it in a heat infused way. I probably wouldn't boil it because it's such a tender leaf. But what I would recommend doing is what I did with my chamomile. I actually didn't use fresh. I used packaged, the tea in the little packets. And then what you do is you get the water to almost, herbalists use some different terms sometime, and they'll call it near boil or just off the boil. It's basically boiled. So if you see it where it's starting to boil, you can turn it off, or it's boiled, turn it off, and just pour it over your plant part. And then generally what you want to do is you want to take a lid, and you have your dried herb plant or your fresh herb plant, And with fresh, you can use more because it's not as concentrated. When dry, it gets smaller, and then you also have to reconcentrate it. But put a lid on it because you want to do that right away because it's going to steam up as you're steeping it in the water. And you don't want to lose those wonderful healing essential oils that are part of the mint. So I hope that clarified it for you. And you can add it to your, you can eat it whole too in your salads and things like that.
Lonnie asked, how do you spell that? And Lonnie, I'm not quite sure what you were asking to be spelled. If you want to unmute for a minute.
All
if
right.
you remember.
Sorry, Terry, it was answered. Thanks.
Oh, it was, okay. Gail asked, do you have recipes for these meals and beverages?
Well, you know, I would say, why don't we look at, I lots of times just make things up as I go. And I am probably at some point going to make a website. I don't have one at this time, but I would go to some of those books that I talked with you about, and it will give you kind of the overview of it. But I don't have the recipes that I can just give out to you now. But I might when I have my herbal, when I have my website.
And also, Becky, the next question was, could you put the cookbook screen up again? And if
This is just such a limited, it's just such a limited, I didn't even put Merriman in my herbs. I must have not thought about putting my herbal books up, but the Wild Remedy one is where my friend, actually, I had the Wild Remedies. I love Rosalie de la Foret. She's an amazing cook and she's a really wonderful herbalist, as is Emily Hahn. And the recipe, I've been making ginger lemonade for a long time. And I just didn't happen to see it in the recipe book where you added the burdock root and the other spices. And that's where that recipe came from. But it's as simple as putting whole ginger. Ginger, I would probably boil that. So the first question had to do with boiling the leaf. And the leaf probably doesn't need to be boiled as much. And in herbal medicine, we call it decoction, which means to basically simmer. And roots and hard plant parts need to probably be, they need to be either reconstituted or rehydrated is the correct word. So, or they're hard, even if they're fresh. So turmeric or a ginger rhizome is hard, a star anise is hard, cinnamon bark is hard. Those things you'd probably want to simmer over a period of time. So when I make ginger lemonade, most often I might simmer it for a while, or I will definitely make it pretty hot and I'll put it in a thermos or just on the top of the stove, whatever. But I sometimes carry my thermos up to bed if I'm not feeling really well, and I just keep pounding myself with it if I'm using it for therapeutic purposes. But then I would boil it. So ginger, and then I would add the lemon later. And then I would add the honey if you're using honey when it's cooled down to less than 110 degrees, or it's like put your finger in it, it doesn't feel that hot, because you will destroy the enzymes in there. And non-processed, non-pasteurized, non-heated honey has many healing properties. One is benefit is the antitussive property, but it also has antimicrobial. A lot of people hear about Manuka honey and they think that that's the only honey that has antimicrobial properties, but it's not so. And then you can also make herbal honeys by adding either probably powders are a good one to do. And I make that a lot too. So sometimes I'll do my golden milk with that, but then I'm aware that if I pour hot milk over top of it, if it's really, really hot, it's going to probably destroy my honey benefits. So, but it's also really good, like on that millet bread, you add maybe a little bit, if you have any oils that you like to use or not, and then add that golden milk honey, or you can do other honeys. You can also add, let's say you have a child that's over the age of 1, because honey shouldn't be used for children less than the age of 12 months, because it could have botulism toxin risks that could be very, very dangerous and fatal, truthfully. But if you have a child that's maybe not sleeping very well, or they're really anxious, but they like honey, and sugar makes the medicine go down easier. It's you could add chamomile powdered. I wouldn't do like full, I would do the powdered and really sifted, because otherwise it's going to be grainy. And sometimes I've made some nighttime sleepy time honeys as well.
Sounds great. And certainly anybody who's got an interest can take a screenshot of the recipes here. We'll leave them up for a while. One of the things you mentioned, Becky, was having a variety of foods, and a lot of what you showed up there was a lot of variety in each bowl or plate. On the other side of that, let's say somebody likes eating oatmeal every day for breakfast. Do you see any problem with that, having the same thing every day at a meal, or is there real benefit to changing things up on a regular basis?
Yeah, I think depends on who we're talking about and how fussy they are and what they can eat and what they can tolerate. If they have any reasons why they can't eat other things or won't eat other things, then you have to go with that. But if you can add some things to it, that ought to always, all these berries, and I mean, you don't have to do all the things that I do. I like to mess around with it. I have all kinds of fun things, and it tastes good, and it makes it fun, and it's nourishing, and it's, I want to remind me of something about vinegar when I come back. It just came into my head, but I like the taste. I like the smell. I like the aesthetically appearance to it. And of course, it's nutritious. And then by having some proteins in there with the seeds and nuts, and that can also help. So it's going to be staying with you a little bit longer. I think it's a wise idea to have a wide variety. I kind of was a picky eater kid. And I like carrots and cucumbers and lettuce when I was a kid, and I didn't really like a lot of vegetables. And now it's like what the heck? It's so important because of what we talked about before. Each plant offers different nutritional benefits, different macronutrients, different micronutrients, and different phytochemicals. So I would say try to get a wide variety.
One of the things that I noticed there, you were talking about mint, and it's such a great, such a tasty thing to have. And you were talking about some of the benefits to kind of relaxing the stomach. And is that better to? I mean, we talked about it already in infused water, but if you are eating it, is it usually better by being in the meal, or as part of the meal, or after the meal? Or does it make much of a difference?
I don't really think so. I mean, anytime something, probably when you have a liquid, you're going to absorb what's in it faster than if it has to be digested. So there's benefit from that standpoint. Certainly, I think a tea is going to be a tea, or probably not a tincture, but maybe a glyceride. But and when we make tinctures in herbal medicine, we try to make those out of things that don't taste as good. But like chamomile tastes, it's such a gentle but effective tea with so many wonderful benefits that to getting it in a tisane rather than in a tincture, although you could make a tincture, especially if you wanted to try to maybe relax a little bit before you go to bed and you don't want to have to wake up because you drank a cup of tea before you went to bed. So I would say you're probably going to get more and quicker results if you take it in a liquid or an extracted form, because if you're extracting it in herbal medicine, we frequently use hydroethanol, which is alcohol, which would be something like vodka or brandy or Everclear, which is 100%, but generally most things will get extracted. The chemical constituents will get extracted out of like 40 to 50% of alcohol, and it extracts both the water soluble and the alcohol soluble, and then it also gives a preservation. So if you're going to make a tea, so sometimes people might make a tea with using fresh or dried thyme, Thymus vulgaris. It has antispasmodic, anti-infective, or antimicrobial properties. It's got a very good affinity for coughs and lungs and trachea. So I know one person that worked in the hospital, I told her about thyme tea and I gave her the recipe it's pretty easy. You just make some thyme tea. You take maybe a bunch, about this much, maybe a quarter cup or so of fresh, or maybe a couple tablespoons of dried, and then pour hot water over it and steep it with the lid on to keep those essential oils in it. Add some lemon a little bit later, and then when it cools down, add some honey. She told the whole unit on the floor about how wonderful it helped with this cough that she'd gotten. So anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent.
A good
I
one.
have a lot of tangents to go off on. So pull me back in. Get the.
Lonnie asked a question about, could you comment on vitamin B12 and then also about fortified cereals?
B12, I think B12 is really important for us. And when people are only plant-based, they're probably going to become deficient with it over time. B12, it's in our tissue for a long period of time if you've stored up enough. It's mostly coming from animal bases, and our body has to cleave it, meaning it breaks it off, and then it has to get absorbed, and then it goes. It's very important for nerve health, for our brain, for our cognition, for peripheral nerves. People that get peripheral neuropathy, sometimes when they have diabetes, they think they got diabetic peripheral neuropathy, and what they've really got is they've got low vitamin B12 peripheral neuropathy. And some of the medicines that we give people can cause nutrient depletion. So it's actually recommended that you check a B12 every year, and magnesium can go down. And Dr. Lieberman was talking about what else you could do for atrial fib. Magnesium is something that maybe should be checked too, because that can contribute to heart arrhythmias. And some of our medicines, specifically the proton pump inhibitors like Protonix or Nexium, those things, they really shut down the proton pump, which basically is the acid in our stomach. And we need acid to digest proteins, cleave things, absorb things, and it can cause a lot of problems. So if you're on those, you may need to be on them for serious purposes, but if you might want to talk it over with your provider to see if you really do need to be on it. So B12, what was the second question?
Yeah, fortified cereals. I'm not sure, Lonnie, what you were asking about fortified cereals, whether they're good or not, or
I think
they're Lonnie's just unmuted, so go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was told, because I had a nutritional consult, and I was told to look at more fortified cereals because the dosages of taking B12 are very confusing to me.
So
Yeah.
fortified, Lonnie, you're talking about fortified with B12 then.
Right. Well, cereals, fortified cereals are supposed to have more B12, right? Right, Becky?
Yeah, they can. I would say I'm not a really big fan of cereals in general, other, the processed ones. There are some that aren't processed, but any that are fortified generally have everything removed, and then they're made into something. And so they fortify them. I do think that fortification, one of the big ones that came about was folic acid, specifically for women of childbearing age, because there was a deficiency that showed that it could help with neural tube development, which is the brain and the spinal cord. And you've probably heard of spina bifida, or the open spine of the neck, or anywhere along it, and it can cause pretty deleterious problems. I think if you have low vitamin B12, it needs to be looked into to see what is the underlying cause. Do you have anything that you're taking medications that can contribute? Most of us over the age of 40 or 50, we start decreasing our acid in our body naturally. It's just kind of what can happen. And if you're taking an acid suppressor, you may not be able to absorb it. So I think that vitamin B12, methylcobalamin is methylated, and your body, there are people that have what they call MTHFR malformations, or it doesn't help. Your body is not able to enzymatically change it to the methylated, which is ultimately the way it needs to work. And there's also some other tests that you can do to see, you know, what's going on. So you want to check it out. I think I actually had mine checked recently, actually a number of months ago, and I was in the normal range, but I'll just tell you that B12, the normal range is something like 300 to almost 1,000, and it depends on the lab. And most integrative practitioners, and probably others do as well, functional and probably some conventional, want to have you at least at over the half upper limit of normal. So if the range is 300 to 1,000, then halfway would be, you know, somewhere in between there, and then you'd want to be above that range. So how do I do it? I'm actually taking a methylated one, and I'm actually on, I couldn't find when I ordered it. I have the ability to order because I'm a prescriber on a particular company that I was able to order it, and it came in like 5,000 micrograms, which is quite a bit more than what the daily recommendation is. But if you're low, oftentimes people will take 500 to 1,000 micrograms daily and then recheck in a few months. You're probably not going to get into any trouble if you go more than what it is. And I rechecked. I wasn't really taking it really religiously because I just didn't get around to ordering it. And I take it sublingually because then it doesn't have to go through the first pass of the liver, and it gets into the bloodstream a little quicker. So that's how I do it. They don't dissolve really well. I kind of chew them up and let it stay underneath my tongue. But I do think it's important. And like I said, Metformin is one of the drugs that we use in diabetes. It's used quite frequently, and it can deplete both magnesium and vitamin B12. And I know I had a couple of patients that I'd seen that were having peripheral neuropathy, and their hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of the 3-month control of blood sugars, and they were perfect. I mean, they were like less than 6. And here they have this pretty significant peripheral neuropathy. And when I checked their B12s, they were low. And so it's really important that we don't miss that as clinicians, because maybe we're contributing to that. We're helping on one end, but we're causing problems. In peripheral neuropathy, I never like to say things can't be reversed, because we know that people are reversing, you know, all kinds of things: cardiovascular disease, cognition problems, dementia. You know, it's always better though to prevent.
Becky, thanks. Thank you so much for the excellent presentation and for the answers to these questions. As a reminder to everybody, our next monthly meeting is Thursday, August 11th at 6 p.m. And we'll have our featured speaker will be Dr. Kushik Reddy from Tampa, Florida. If you'd like to receive notice of this and any upcoming PBNL events and are not currently on our list, you can register on our website, pbnow.org, or by Googling PB Now and clicking on the white Learn More button on our homepage to register. As a reminder, if you'd like to check out our past meetings, you can just go to the video library section on our website and go back and watch entire talks, or just flip through and find the parts that you have interest in. Thanks again, both to Becky and to Dr. Liberman for sharing your valuable time and knowledge with us tonight. Good night, everybody, and thanks for coming.